When it comes to debt, there's really three things that we're looking at. Number one, we're looking at the balance. At its basic form, if you're paying interest, usually credit cards, because they're not secured by anything, have a high interest rate. So it's a good rule of thumb to, if you have a credit card, never to have a balance on that credit card. So you want to look at the balance. You also want to look at the payment, because the payment comes down to cash flow. And so that's where we're going to look at a way to analyze debt, looking at the payment in the form of the like how much you owe. And then there's the interest rate. This is BetterWealth with Caleb Williams. Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of the BetterWealth podcast. I'm here with Jereme Roodhouse, and from the Frontlines, we're going to talk about debt, and not just all kinds of debt. We're going to talk mainly about credit card debt and consumer debt that people very much want to pay off. I know a lot of people come to us and they fill out all their information, and sometimes they request for more data fields because we only allow 10. I mean, in our basic form, we allow 10. And sometimes we need to add more when it comes to consumer debt. And so what I want to do is there's a couple approaches in how we help people. Because I think this is one thing when we talk about living intentionally, when we talk about being efficient, this is one thing that we can, it's like we just understand how to have conversations around this area. And remember, our goal is to better your control and to better your long-term growth. And so a lot of times there's an art and a science in how we approach this. So what I want you to do is kind of give an overview as your experience as you meet with people. Because I know there's some people that come in that have no debt. Yeah. And I would say majority of people have some kind of debt. We talk about good debt versus bad debt. And right now we're going to talk about better ways to pay off bad debt.
Yeah, for sure. I think that your comment about this being an art and a science is important to note as well. And there's many formulas out there. You can find pretty much anything you want online to justify how you want to pay off debt. The science of it is the math, right? Yeah. Doing the math and finding out where the efficiencies are. Then the art is matching that to the client and what you're trying to achieve in your lifestyle. So when we combine those two, that's when we really try to optimize for people. What's the best way to get these, what we would consider a drag on your household economy, taken care of most efficiently? So a lot of the dialogues that I have are just explain this to me. And when you get somebody to explain, well, this line item was for this line item was for that, this line item was for that, a lot of times, look, I'm a huge fan of credit capacity. Yeah. Being able to leverage my credit capacity, meaning the amount of money that a credit card company or a bank or somebody's going to let me borrow. I recently was able to gap a purchase for somebody because of credit capacity. Yep. So they were in a situation where they needed, X amount of dollars. Yep. I was able to help them with that, and the money never left my hands. I just received points for it. Yeah. So in that situation, it was an amazing way to use the credit card.
This is another episode, but didn't you buy a car using a credit card?
Yeah.
Yeah, I love it. That's another episode. Stay tuned. But yeah, I mean, so yeah, credit cards are not bad, and quite frankly, lines of credit gives you options.
Correct.
And if used properly, gives you a lot of opportunities. But yeah, continue. I want people to know that credit cards are not bad, and we're not telling you to go get a ton of credit card debt. That's not what we're saying.
Like so many tools, it's the use thereof. Yeah. And in the context of your model. For you and your discipline and your habits, having access to a large credit capacity may not be a good idea for you because it could cause you to put yourself in a negative situation. Yep. So when folks come to us, I would say the biggest things that we see are student debt, which is sometimes devastating, and then credit cards. And these things get out of control very quickly because it's very easy, right? Amazon has really capitalized on this because you have one-click buying and it's at your door. It's amazing. And so people consume, and then they look at their statement and go, when did that happen? So those are really the most troubling debts that we see, and the high-interest auto loans. Those are the ones that are troubling because you have a depreciating asset that may not even have the value of what you owe on it again, and it's not working right, and I need to repair it. So when we start to look at this, Caleb, I like the way you talk about how you analyze each line item. So can you go back and share with us a simple way to analyze the efficiency of that particular line item?
Yeah, so I talk about good debt and bad debt, and essentially the definition of good debt is a tool, using it as a tool to put money back in your pocket.
Okay.
So we talk about mortgages, we talk about certain business debt, even, some 0% interest debt for a period of time, if it's truly 0%. Can have advantages.
Absolutely.
And bad debt is the exact opposite. By having that debt, it's taking more money away from you now and in the future. And so there's a couple ways to look at,
and that's cash flow.
Cash flow. Yep.
We say that 3 times because the importance of cash flow, what's coming into my household economy, and am I controlling or consuming that?
Right.
And when you use the word controlling, it really becomes very powerful, because in a lot of situations where debt is very high, I sacrifice control.
Yeah.
And when you just simply compare, okay, what is my required debt service, meaning everything that I have to pay on all of my debts, and folks look at this and they go, oh my gosh, that's $2,200 a month. Well, if we transfer that into, well, what happens if I controlled $2,200 a month in perpetuity, it gets extremely powerful.
Right. Yeah, and
so how do we recapture that?
Yeah, and I just want you to know, like, when it comes to debt, there's really 3 things that we're looking at. Number 1, we're looking at the balance. And it's pretty, like, I grew up in a house, Jeremy, where if you have a credit card, you pay off the balance every month. Now, I know that there's some people that are hacking the system that are using 0%. I'm actually going to try to get somebody on the show that's doing that. But at its basic form, if you're paying interest, usually credit cards, because they're not secured by anything, have a high interest rate. So it's a good rule of thumb to, if you have a credit card, never to have a balance on that credit card. So you want to look at the balance. You also want to look at the payment, because the payment comes down to cash flow. And so that's where we're going to look at a way to analyze debt, looking at the payment in the form of the, like, how much you owe. And then there's the interest rate. Now, the basic form of looking at debt and just asking, like, is this good debt or bad debt, is looking at the interest rate. And the interest rate you can consider as the control cost. It's really the opportunity meter. Because if I'm looking at this sheet right here, this is just a random person that we pulled. I'm looking at some debts, 16%, 13%, 17%, 23%, 26%, 14%, 18%. And then I'm looking at their investments, and I'm saying, like, they're not even saying in like averages that they're getting over 10%. So
so okay, I'm going to invest, and yet I have these debts in my model. How much do I have to earn in order to outweigh 10, 12, 14, 16, 25, 30% interest?
Yeah. It's like the equivalent of knowing where you want to go and, like, going in reverse. Going in reverse and trying to, like, you know where you want to go. You have all the intentions to get there, but because of inefficiency, it's just super, super tough. And that's why, if you look at the cash flow in this just person's scenario in general, there's thousands and thousands of dollars a month going to service inefficient, toxic debt. While at the same time, there's money being saved, invested, and that's an example. That's just an example in this scenario of, like, inefficiency. So there's one last thing that I want to mention when it comes to debt. There's not just the balance, the monthly payment, and the interest rate. That it just kind of gives us a big picture, kind of like, okay, if I'm paying 12%, can I consistently make 12% a year and really have a clear audit of yourself? That's one way to look at it. The other way is, what activity am I doing with this debt? Consumer, auto, like, all these debts right here, I guarantee you, because of the descriptions, they're not being used to bring in money. They're not being used to invest in. You maybe could invest in yourself by going on a vacation or whatever, but in all honesty, this is consumption.
100%. And I think that is an important distinction. When we say things like credit capacity, I maintain as high of credit capacity as I possibly can, because while it's not the most efficient way to get access to money, if I don't have that credit capacity available, an opportunity may pass me by. If an 18% return opportunity comes by and I can get access to capital at 11, that still may make sense for me to do.
So my pushback to that, I just want, because my pushback is, can you get an 18%? Because that is true. Mathematically, that's amazing. And I feel like a lot of people, especially in the entrepreneur space that are just getting started, they're like, I'm going to double my business. And they kind of buy into I'm just going to rack up credit card debt.
And
so
I'm not being arbitrary 18%.
But he's right.
I'm saying, have I run numbers? Have I calculated? Do I have a plan to execute on this? And quite frankly, this is why it's nice to have a third-party coach involved so that you can take your good idea fairy and put her under the model and the the criticism of data and say, this may not be as good of an idea as I originally thought because of the other implications. And I don't want to get too far afield, but leveraging money in this way, if you really want to truly build wealth and increase what it is that you're doing, all of these things really do need to come into play for you. But at basic folks that are saying, how do I take control of this? Having these types of debts, you've got to take 2 steps back, and you don't have to do anything. I struggle to say that. Taking 2 steps back, pausing on investing, pausing on savings over and above some sort of reserve account, and attacking these types of things is hard to deal with because people don't want to do that. But you're in a hole, and you got to get out of it.
So I want to make the analogy of paying off debt like investing in real estate, because I see all of these debts as cash flowing bad assets, but that they could turn into an asset. And here's why: you pay off this debt, all this cash flow that you are dishing out each month now is in your control, and you have the freedom to be able to do what you want with that. Grow it, control it. So hear me out here. The way that I think is the best way to analyze debt, and if you're watching this on YouTube, take notes. If you're listening to this in the car, keep driving, but maybe pull off to the side because this is going to help you a lot, is so we can look at interest rates, we can look at what's the biggest balance, the smallest balance, but I think the best way to analyze debt, and this is not something that I came up with originally, there's a lot of people that talk about this, like the cash flow index, we call it the cash flow scorecard, is if you take your balance. Okay, this could be $1,000 debt. This could be $15,000. This could be $100,000. This could be a mortgage of $700,000. You take your balance, and then you take your minimum payment. This is the minimum requirement that you have to pay with this debt each month. And you take your balance and you divide it by the minimum payment. You're going to get a number. Now, the smaller the number is essentially saying that debt is very inefficient. Why? Because you're taking a large piece of cash flow out of your monthly cash flow is going to service a small debt. Versus a bigger number represents a smaller portion of your cash flow going in the relation to that balance. So and maybe you should let's talk about this to make this make more sense. But I'm looking at this person's debt, and I'm seeing something like you could take a debt at 25%, and this gives them they have a scorecard of 27, which essentially means this debt right here, Jeremy, is a very, very inefficient debt.
Well, and we also have a negative on here.
Right. Well, no, that's just that. No, that's because of my handwriting. That's not a negative. That's it should have been an arrow. But then they also have a debt at 18% that it gives a score of 19.
Right.
Meaning a debt at 18% is actually more inefficient than the debt at 25%. Now, by all means, these are both really, really bad debts, but it's a way to start analyzing where you should put your focus from a cash flow perspective.
Right.
And a lot of people are taking a shotgun approach, but if we really want to get wise and get momentum, we need to start stacking debts from worst score to best score. And in this case scenario, there's only one debt that they have that's a good debt, and just start knocking these out. And once you get bad debt knocked out, number one, you're freeing up the most amount of cash flow compared to the balance, and that can snowball down to the next bad debt. And we recommend at BetterWealth, big picture, that if you have really toxic debt, a lot of people want to start an and asset and all this stuff, and mathematically it doesn't make sense. I know that's going to sound crazy, but it's like if you're paying 25% interest, yes, compound interest is amazing, but we have to make sure that we got to start the foundation, and it's hard to start a foundation when you are getting crushed over here.
So let's give this a framework to kind of round out this episode. When you sit down and you look at however you track your money, which first of all, again, you're going to hear me say time and time again, track your money, track your money, track your money. Know where things are going. That way you can actually call yourself a good steward. So this evening, this afternoon, whenever you think about this, write out, line item by line item, your debts, okay? Car loan, credit card, student loans, whatever the line item is. Then take the balance, what you owe on it, and divide it by the minimum monthly payment. We're talking about minimum. What do I have to pay to remain in right standing with that particular line item? That score, okay, right beside it. Okay, the higher the score, the more efficient for your cash flow purposes that particular line item is. And then look at those scores and start to think about this within the whole context of your monthly cash flow. Okay, if I was to attack this particular debt, what you should be able to analyze using this score is that particular line item is going to insert more cash flow back into my monthly statement. Okay, if we increase our cash flow, we increase our opportunity to control what is coming into our household. And that's really where we're getting at here, is trying to give folks a framework to start to analyze this, because it's not uncommon to see 10, 15 line items of consumer, student debt, car loans, personal loans, horse loans, RV loans, you name it. They're out there. But how do we start to have a framework to look at what is the efficiency of this particular line item, attack that particular thing, increase my monthly cash flow, and really start to take control of what it is that you have, what you've been blessed with as far as resources. Does that make sense?
You need a raise, Jeremy.
I agree 100%.
That was very beautiful. I really appreciate you giving that framework. And the reason why we're bringing this up is we're realizing time and time again that this mindset is really, really powerful. And we have to start thinking about everything in form of cash flow, whether you're investing in real estate, which we love buying into that, or whether it's, paying off debt. It all comes back to cash flow and what we do with that long term and in the short term. Any final thoughts? I thought that was really powerful.
Thanks, I appreciate that. I like compliments from the guy. No, I think a lot of times there's some shame attached to debt, and I don't know how to, because I don't know each and every one of you that are listening to this, but I shouldn't say but, and let that shame go.
Yeah, please.
Because to be a good steward, to be a good manager, to be a good extreme owner of this part of your life means a ton, and it will allow you to show up better in other parts of your life. And this is the mission of BetterWealth. If we could gain control, have extreme and exert extreme ownership over the financial aspect of our life, how much better do we show up? How much more intentionally do we show up with our husbands, with our wives, with our children, with our families, communities, churches? And you got to move past the shame of it, deal with it, and move on.
Also, if this is the first episode that you're listening to, thank you, because I have a funny feeling people are going to share this, and I'm hoping that this video, this podcast can go viral, because I think it can help so many people. If you go to betterwealth.com/podcast, it will give you kind of the place to start for the show. I mean, now that we're over 200 episodes, we're producing every day, has advantages because people are hearing us and sharing, and it's amazing. But also it's like, man, I just found your podcast. Where do I start?
Right.
And so we created a place to be like, if you're new and you want to learn about the And Asset is a book I wrote. It's essentially what put us on the map. We have kind of the best episodes that highlight that. If you want to hear about BetterWealth, we have a kind of a path on that and some of our favorite episodes and interviews. And so you can go to betterwealth.com/podcast. We're here to help. We're here to serve. BetterWealth is all about living intentionally today and in the future. And so, Jeremy, thank you for continuing to live that out. We'll see you tomorrow. Thank you so much for listening to the BetterWealth podcast. It would mean the world to me if you could hit subscribe, leave a review, and share this with the people that you know and love.